So, did y'all make your plans for Friday the 13th yet? We got one coming up just next month, and which means it's in October this year, so it's kind of a special occasion for horror fans. I haven't made my plans yet, but it did get me thinking about the Friday the 13th franchise, and in particular, that all elusive 13th movie. Now, if you don't know, they've been talking about a new Friday the 13th movie for about the last decade and a half, but the franchise has been caught in a legal entanglement for the last several years that has pretty much blocked any movement on a new project. Now, a lot of the fans have been saying, just get that all sorted out so we can finally get to work on a new project already. We've been waiting a long time. And yeah, I would say the same thing, but this last time when I was thinking about it, I came to a kind of a different conclusion, and that was, do we really want a new Friday the 13th movie in this era? Why don't we take a look and I'll show you what I mean. When Sean S. Cunningham first came up with Friday the 13th, his whole idea was based on the title, and the whole point of the title being its unlucky nature associated with the number 13. That turned out to be a nasty prophecy for the series. It just seems like there's a curse on the 13th film. But in this case, the curse is because of a legal situation. In 2016, Victor Miller filed a claim on his ownership of the original Friday the 13th screenplay. The case went to court, and Victor Miller actually won the case in 2018. Sean S. Cunningham, the producer and director of the original film, also has a significant claim on the series, and he filed an appeal. The case went back to court, with Victor Miller once again coming out on the winning side in 2021. But not much has actually happened since then. The series itself has just been lying there frozen like Jason himself in between movies. Part of the reason for this is because while Victor Miller won the rights, what he actually owns is just the contents of the original film itself. Anything to do with adult Jason, the hockey mask, or any of the other elements established in the sequels is not part of what Victor Miller actually owns. That basically means that these different elements that are commonly associated with Friday the 13th's identity are held by different people who will not work together, at least not for the time being. Probably the most similar situation we could point to is what happened to the Child's Play series, and we actually did get to see that series bifurcate into two different camps. I'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. From my vantage point, it does look like Sean S. Cunningham and Victor Miller both have valid claims, but I just can't really respect the way that either of them are handling this. What would be smart is for them to cut a deal, establish a new partnership, and then that would allow the series to move forward. But it doesn't seem like they're able to do that. It's like two adult children arguing over their favorite toy. The end result is that they're both in timeout. Like many other Friday the 13th fans, I've been wanting to see a new entry in the series for a long time as well, but recently I've been coming to the conclusion that maybe this legal situation is actually the thing that's helping the series stay out of trouble. See, fans aren't the only ones who have been clamoring for a new entry in the series. Hollywood producers have been chasing the project for quite a long time as well, pretty much ever since the last one came out. There was talk for years about what the next movie would be. At one point, it sounded like they were pretty serious about doing a found footage Friday the 13th movie, which sounded absolutely dreadful to me, but it really did seem like that was the direction they were going to go. It's quite possible that the legal situation actually prevented that from happening, although I seem to remember that they were kind of moving away from that idea before this whole thing kicked off. Yet it does go to show just what kind of direction they could end up going if they had their druthers. As I mentioned earlier, there was a similar situation that happened to the Child's Play franchise. If you look at what happened to that series, there's basically two different franchises going on at once. One is over at MGM. MGM produced the original 1988 Child's Play, but from Child's Play 2 onward, the series has been held by its original writer, Don Mancini, and has been handled by Universal. So the rights in that situation are split. What ended up happening here is that MGM still found a way to produce a remake of the original film, while Don Mancini and Universal were developing a Chucky TV series. Both projects came out and seemed to confuse fans as to which direction the series was actually going in. Well, it's because the series is now two series. It's almost like the old myth where if you cut a worm in half, it effectively becomes two worms. You did get the Child's Play remake from MGM, but it bore very little resemblance to the established series. But then when we got the Chucky TV series, well, probably the less said about that, the better. And that leads me to the other problem. Current year, can we actually trust anyone in Hollywood to produce a Friday the 13th movie without absolutely ruining it like they've ruined everything else? Among the Hollywood producers that have openly expressed interest in making a new Friday the 13th movie is Jason Blum, who in 2018 rebooted the Halloween franchise to pretty great fanfare. but that all changed just a couple of years later when we saw what they actually did with it. I don't know about you, but once I saw Halloween Ends, I kind of felt like the whole thing was for nothing. And that seems to be a common sentiment amongst the rest of the fans as well. For a variety of reasons, but not the least of which is the fact that they went completely woke with the whole thing. You can't do that with a slasher series. Slashers are an outlaw genre. They're a politically incorrect animal. And if you tried to do that with Friday the 13th, it would be absolute garbage. Everything to come out of the superhero genre in recent years has served as a reminder that Hollywood just doesn't seem to care anymore. They'll continue to make absolute trash until the entire industry is turned upside down. And, well, take a look. It seems like the entire industry is basically turned upside down now, isn't it? So if it hadn't been for the whole legal situation, it's actually quite possible that we would have gotten a new Friday the 13th movie, and it's equally as possible that it would have been terrible. Quite possibly bad enough to have permanently damaged the series in such a way that fans wouldn't even want to see a new one ever again. If you consider that what a Friday the 13th movie really is at its core is just a campground slasher with Jason stalking and slashing teenagers around Camp Crystal Lake, then yeah, Friday the 13th Part 7 is essentially the last time we actually had that, with the exception of the remake, of course, but let's be honest, folks, that remake sucked a dick and you know it. And I, for one, really just want to see it go back to basics. And that's kind of what's so sad about this whole thing. Hollywood is probably incapable of actually making a good Friday the 13th movie. They would almost certainly overdo the whole thing right from the very beginning, probably by putting way too much money into it and running it through the typical Hollywood machine. This is a kind of project that really doesn't need any of that, and the production model for the kind of movies that the original Friday the 13th series were just doesn't exist anymore. The best way to handle this is just to hire a bunch of fans. Get a screenwriter, and that's one screenwriter to handle the screenplay, who actually understands slasher films and the Friday the 13th series, to write something that would be faithful to the series. Just keep it basic. Jason stalking and slashing counselors at Camp Crystal Lake, and from there you can move outward, explore some of the lore. Maybe they could even do that whole winter-themed project that fans have been talking about for years. It's all on the table, but you gotta keep it simple. And if there's anything Hollywood just can't do, it's keep it fucking simple. And if you look at the writer's strike and the actor's strike, it's all kind of a big indicator of this. It's just way too complicated. People are making too much out of something that really doesn't need to be made that much out of. It's kind of like Sean Cunningham and Victor Miller themselves fighting over this whole thing. If you can't come to terms on what should be a fairly basic compromise, then don't even bother with it. It's really actually kind of for the best that this whole thing is frozen right now. I'd hate to see it affecting the overall series. I'd love to see more of an expanded universe thing going on with tie-in novels and comics and video games, but I don't know about a new Friday the 13th movie, at least not in this era. Perhaps after the whole woke thing dies out and we see a total transformation in Hollywood, then there'll be a better chance for it. But for the time being, I'm actually kind of glad that it's paralyzed. I think it's actually protecting it. And look, I don't mean to be so pessimistic on this whole thing. It's not that I'm really down on the whole industry and all of that. It's just I don't like what I'm seeing right now. I don't think anybody really does. And look, I'm as big a fan of the Friday the 13th franchise as anybody, except for maybe the people that do those 24-hour marathons. I'm not quite that hardcore, but I'm a pretty big fan, and I have been most of my life. So I do want to see a new Friday the 13th movie, but I want to see him do it right. I don't want to see another one that I come out of the theater and just go, God, why did they even bother? We've had way too much of that lately, and I just feel like until a lot of reformations are made to that industry, we probably won't see them get it right. You know, what they really need to do is bring back that middle market movie where the studios just oversee it. They supply the budget, they hand it off to a smaller production company, preferably one that's not based in LA, preferably one that's consisting of kind of outlaw filmmakers, especially with this genre, which is essentially what the series was to begin with. And let them just go completely raw and rugged, not imbue it with all of that socio-political garbage that they keep hammering audiences over the head with in Hollywood that people are absolutely sick of. We just want to see them do it the right way. Just keep it simple, keep it raw, and I think if they did it that way, they could absolutely make it work, but I just don't see it happening in this era, at least not for a few more years until so much of this crap that they're dealing with right now gets sorted out. But who knows? It looks like it might well be sorted out within the next few years. Then that just leaves the issue between Sean Cunningham and Victor Miller, if they can stop squabbling, and if they can actually put together a compromise and go, okay, let's make some money with this, because it would make money if they did it right. That's all I'm saying here. But we'll see what happens. In the meantime, I'm just going to keep on watching and hope I see something cool. And until next time I see you, this is B-JOLT. See you later. chills.